In case y'all don't know, that's our sweet granddaughter's voice. And we are Nene and Papa. But for this show, we're Doug and Danae. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Danae. How are you today?
I am fired up. Fired up for this one. Oh,
really? So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to talk about what's in a name.
I have a good friend of mine, Bill Shakespeare, and Bill, for example, has said in the past to me anyway that a rose by any other name would smell just as sweet.
Because you are such a follower of the classics. I know that.
I am.
Right after you watch Napoleon Dynamite or something like that.
Exactly. So yeah, what's in a name? What's in a name? I like that.
I think that that phrase is very popular. Everybody knows that.
Sure.
A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. In other words, doesn't matter what you call it.
Right.
It's still a rose.
Yeah.
And Romeo and Juliet kind of ran into that problem when Romeo's last name seemed to be a source of conflict in the family. Mm-hmm. And she's like, just because his name is Montague, did I say that? Montague.
Ooh, that sounded good.
I know. That's not who he is.
Right.
Our names do not define us.
Right. They're necessary. I mean, you gotta have something as an identity. It's just that labels, you can't just use a label as the sum total of an identity, right?
Right. Like when our good friend, we're going to call her Connie.
That's right. Oh my gosh. This is a great story, folks. You've got to hear this one. One day we had guests there actually for a weekend, and one of the people, Connie, looked at Danae, but referred to her as Denny. Why don't you tell the story?
Well, there's a little backstory to that in that she was very big into the consciousness movement and identity and things like that. And she, and a friend that was there with us said, well, actually her name isn't Denny, it's Danae. And this woman, who I shall call Connie, looked and said, oh, well, it really doesn't matter. I could call her Cabinet or Cookie because that's not her identity.
Right.
And I thought, I was so taken back. I really didn't know.
I think we all were.
How to respond. And,
yeah.
Okay, I get that.
Right.
That is just a point of reference. That's not my true identity.
Yeah.
But we get caught up in labels a lot of time. And so what I wanted to talk about a little bit today is the labels that seem to, like these single word labels that we'll talk about in just a minute, specifically in the Enneagram. Not just in the Enneagram, but in life. And so we'll use a single word and then we just think that is the sum total of the person that we're talking about.
Right. Like, for example, someone might say, oh, he's a Republican.
Oh, and then you have a whole identity.
Profile.
Right, profile, that's the word.
That's it.
Oh, well, she's a mom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or he's an artist.
We could go on. She's a belly dancer.
You know her too?
These are all me.
Yeah.
No, wait. So what we're going to talk about today is the reason I like to use the numbers is because they're value neutral.
Right.
And I love how it's stated that the numbers imply the whole range of attributes and behaviors of each type without specifying anything, either positive or negative.
Yes.
So you don't have to automatically draw a whole conclusion based on just a number.
Absolutely. And it is interesting. When I first started studying the Enneagram with you and some of the initial introductory material, I was at first very interested. And don't you think it's a good starting place? I mean, you got to start somewhere to at least see the words that are associated with each number because they are accurate.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. But it's when you hear somebody say, oh, well, he's an achiever.
Yeah, right.
And so what I think is we attach to that one word. And so, for example, the 2s are called helpers. But are the helpers not loyalists as well?
Right.
Or the 8s, they're called the challengers, but are they also not peacemakers?
Right, right. And for me personally, I don't feel so bad now when someone says, oh, your husband's a sloth.
Okay. Yes.
Well, actually, that's not the peacemaker is technically the one word.
Peacemaker.
I think sloth is when we drill down, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw a cartoon the other day.
Yeah.
And it was just a drawing. Maybe you have to see it, but I'm going to describe it anyways. And so there's these men and they're looking at this other guy and say, okay, as a 9, sum up your personality in 3 words.
Yeah.
And he just goes, lazy.
Yeah. I love it.
I do too.
Yeah, but you do have to start somewhere. But again, it's this balance. I think what you're saying, right, is that there's a balance between, first of all, using a label to, quote, get a handle on the general profile of what you're about or what other people are about, but realizing that there's a lot of complexity underneath that general handle.
Right. Because
yeah.
if you just start with the one description and say, oh, well, I know so-and-so must be, a 7 because all they are the true description of an enthusiast.
Yeah.
Well, there's way more to a 7 than being enthusiastic all the time. And like the 5s, they're called the investigators. But if you get into the study of it, you look at things like in the Big Blue Book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram that we all refer to, Riso and Hudson. He also describes the investigator or the 5 type as alert, insightful, curious, independent, and innovative. And at their best, 5s are visionary pioneers. I love that.
Yeah.
So when you just say, well,
it
they're investigators, they want to know everything. I would prefer a visionary pioneer, but you just have to drill down. But they're great beginnings, but that's not the sum total. That's all I'm saying. What's in a name?
Right.
What do we attach to as our label?
And do you try to emphasize this, Danae, because one of the big pushbacks that we talked about in a previous podcast is for someone who's brand new to the Enneagram, there's this aversion to being labeled, to being put in some little box that says this is who you are, when you yourself know all the complexities of what you're about.
Absolutely, 100%. That's my point. You just summed it up.
Oh,
exactly.
Well,
that's why I hired you.
Oh, thank goodness.
Like, I'll give an example, another one. My mom, she is a 2 through and through. She's definitely a helper, but she has also been an incredible challenger. And as we know with the Enneagram, as you get deeper into the subject, that somebody might say, oh, well, that's where she goes in her area of integration. She goes to an 8. Or disintegration, excuse me. So 2s go to 8s, but this is just an example of all of us. We're all every number. In fact, my mom, back to her, she actually did a protest march on the Capitol in Texas.
Oh, wow.
And you would never look at somebody, just, oh, well, Erlene, she's the one who brings the pie to everything. Or if you need anything, she's there in a heartbeat. Yes, she's definitely that. But I'm telling you, the complexity of who we are at any given moment brings out the other parts of us. So we are the sum total of all of these numbers. It's just that at certain times, certain characteristics become more dominant. Don't you agree?
I think not only do I agree, but what I've learned and some of the things that you and I will talk about, because we've discussed this over coffee, as the listeners get used to kind of our journey, is you and I will share some moments when this complexity, and the reason you're setting this up right now at the beginning, just to do the ABCs of this, is so that we can begin to go a little deeper, even into areas where you and I have had conflict and we've reacted in different ways. And the critical importance of understanding why the complexity, that you can't just study the Enneagram from this general point of view and really get the full impact and use of it.
Right. And we'll talk about some things in our next podcast that I refer to as language barriers. And we'll address that at another point. And I'm going to share some stories, or we are, but one that just came to my awareness recently. I'm 60 years old. I have grown children, and I don't know if it was the right thing or just the most shocking thing to ask my oldest child, what was it like to have a 7 as a mother? And so we'll talk about that later. But yeah,
because you might think again with this enthusiast, right? And I think more that word fun has always been at the core of your life experiences.
It is, but mama ain't always fun.
No. And that's what I'm trying to say is that while you might expect a response to have something to do with your fun nature, your enthusiasm of life, et cetera, sometimes you can get surprising answers. And therefore it's important to understand not just your outlook on things, but how other people might perceive the very same circumstances in a completely different way.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I've got lots of examples of that, and not just ours, other people. And we're going to have other people on the show. We just wanted to take a few episodes, introduce ourselves, the concept of why we're calling this Love Thy Number, and just kind of set the stage. I hope you tune in as we get more involved in depth with this. And I hope everybody's not just tuning into the first 5 or 10 seconds to hear my granddaughter's voice, although I listen to it over and over.
Yeah, it works for me. And I do agree with your approach here. I like it that I have trouble communicating different concepts myself. We talked in one of the podcasts that I do a lot of things that have to do with spiral dynamics, integral theory, and all that kind of thing. It's always difficult when you're doing a podcast series to know who your audience is because you have no experience with that. So the question in my mind is how many people are just now becoming familiar with the Enneagram where there needs to be X amount of stress on ABCs that people who've been in the Enneagram for years are listening to this and they're wondering, okay, yeah, we know all that. Can we get to the drill down stuff? So there's always that balance, right?
Right. And we're trying to set the stage, like you said.
Yeah.
But moving on. So now you get it. This is a little bit more about why we're going to refer to the numbers. But speaking of numbers, let's talk about the terrible twos.
Oh.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what just automatically came to your mind?
Toddlers, little ones, and not in a positive way. I see a little one on the floor holding its breath, kicking, screaming, and
was that you?
Is it? Yeah, that's me when I find out we're out of ice cream.
Oh, that's a whole episode in and of itself.
Oh, I just exposed myself.
Yes, terrible twos. And automatically I say that and we have this vision of a screaming baby. And so again, we put a label and so one of the things that, I've said all my life, well, at least the last 20 years, if I had said this all my life, I might have parented differently but you can't go back. Anyway, I always have said what you think about comes about. So like when I hear a young mom saying, oh, we're entering the terrible twos, then I think, well, that's what they're going to be because that's what you expect. And I would like to just shoot the person who came up with that phrase because I don't see it that way. In fact, I've always called them the terrific twos. Right?
Oh, wow. I like that.
I love it because it's when they're coming into their awareness of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a little challenging because they don't want to wear what you lay out, or they want to do it. I do it myself.
Yes,
I do it myself. Mm-hmm. So, but it's it's how you phrase it and it's how you look at it. I did call it the terrific twos, but then there were the threes. And
yeah. And
so we won't go.
Well, you've always said that to me, especially now that I've experienced the grandkids coming along, and you and I can sit back in a relaxed mode and talk about the situation rather than being the parent who's in the middle of the soup, right there where the fire is. And you've always said that to you, it was the threes.
Yeah, they were the more
challenging. That's interesting.
Yeah, but anyways, and nobody has a real label that they've attached to the threes that I can think of. It's just that identity around, a 2-year-old. Well, it's a given that they're going to be terrible. And it's absolutely not true. It's not what you look at. It's what you see.
And something that occurred to me while you're talking and saying this is, as a 9, my word is peacemaker.
Yeah.
Okay. That's my word, peacemaker. So most of the time you're around someone who's a peacemaker, they're someone who appears to be calm, always looking for a way for everyone to get along, always looking for a way for the waters to be smooth, don't rock the boat, etc. However, one of the challenges for a 9 is anger, which I know you're going to get into that down the road. But if you're used to being around a person that always appears to be that calmness of a peacemaker, and then you see that they have a struggle with something that really makes them angry, and they really get angry about something, you see anger energy come out of that person.
Yeah, I know that one.
It freaks people out because they've never seen that. Although, and I said this to you the other day, it is true that you are, a peacemaker, but you should remember that in the Old West, a peacemaker was a pistol that you carried in your holster too. So that's the other side of us as a 9.
See, and if people knew that as an identity, they might look at the peacemaker and understand. That's just so brilliant, babe.
There you go.
Yes, I understand it's a different word, but if you knew that, they want to keep the peace in the town, but make no mistake, they will.
We will take you out.
I didn't know how to say that, but
it's true.
You're like that little duck. You're all calm on the surface, but your legs are just going faster and faster underneath the water. But yes.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about that, one-word labels and how those can also create and set up situations where it's difficult to understand any of these numbers if you're limiting them to these simplistic labels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I say something that has nothing to do with this right now?
Yeah, I'm hungry too. What are you thinking?
There's a goose outside.
Oh.
And it's
Can you hear it?
Going crazy. Yes, I can hear that goose.
Oh.
And I've been hearing it all morning. And this morning I went outside because we have baby geese. And see, I have words for that too. They're one-word descriptions and they're very accurate. But that goose this morning was going crazy, honking, honking, honking. And I went outside. I was like, where is that coming from? Y'all, there was a goose on the roof of our house. This has nothing to do with anything.
So
but
a
it was
7,
just
a 7 is typically somebody that can get diverted. Would you say that 7s can sometimes get diverted?
Oh, yeah. Like they say, oh, look, puppy, as a phrase. Well, no,
there's a puppy.
Oh, look, goose.
There's a goose on the roof.
There's a goose on the roof.
And there goes Danae.
Anyway,
You're going to pull it back in?
Pull it back in
okay.
Because I want to go back to the 2s, only I would like to go back and talk about the Enneagram 2s. And I call them the terrific 2s. They're wonderful. They are the most giving, loving people. I've heard it said that the 2s are like a plug looking for a socket because they respond to connection. But I have a really good friend who is also, she's a 2, and her husband says no one can out-servant her.
Ooh.
Right?
That's an interesting comment.
It's also a tall order to fill if you don't know that you have to love yourself first before you can serve and love all these other people, right?
Yeah, or you'll find yourself constantly depleted, or I guess that's the way in which a 2 would find value, right?
Well, yes, an unhealthy 2 would, because they see their value in how they can take care of other people. So it's kind of like there's this, I'm giving to you, but what I really need is for you to express your gratitude so I'll feel loved for what I'm doing for you. And I asked a group on a Facebook page, how do they, as 2s, how do they experience unconditional love? And the first reply I got was from a lady, and she said, I don't think there's anything as unconditional love except maybe my love for my children. And then I got, more and more answers. But the more I read through these, I just began to see in the unhealthy stage, you really, underneath the surface of what you may be doing for somebody else, is this need to be valued for what you do. And so I said, so if somebody asked you to go to lunch, just out for a lunch date, would you feel that there was a hidden agenda, like, okay, I'll go to lunch to you, but I know it's really a setup because you expect me to do something for you? Right. Oh.
Yeah, and I could see that. Would that not be a real problem, like for you as a mom, let's take example with your kids, to be expecting that appreciation to come back because of the servant role you have, and so the appearance from your kids of ungratefulness would maybe be more of a challenge if you had a 2 type personality?
I think so, definitely, until you take some time to understand why I function this way. Why do I think this way? This is why the Enneagram is such a beautiful tool. It's to help us become aware of why I think this way. And once you discover, oh, this is not how I receive love, I'm just loved for who I am.
Yes.
Then the motivation seems to dissipate, and you get to just relax and understand, my value is just simply in being. I don't have to earn your love. I am love. And also for the 2s, saying yes to someone else's request all the time means saying no to yourself in so many cases. So the goal would be to learn to say yes to yourself, and that saying no to somebody does not threaten their love for you. And if you're used to being in this mode all your life, it may come as a shock to them.
Yeah.
Right?
I could see that.
Yes, if you say, "No, I'm not baking cookies for the PTA."
Right. Right.
They're like, "Wait, no."
Or you're that
you
person in the family. That becomes a role you play within the family, right?
Absolutely. And we get caught up in our habitual ways of being, ways of thinking. This is the growth, is to realize this is habitual. This is a process that I've just become comfortable with, even when it's uncomfortable. That's what I find amazing about humanity, is we get very comfortable in stress, in discomfort, in things that bring us pain and anger. But to stop and say, wait, this is me. This is up to me to change. So
basically, this Enneagram discussion that we're having, one of the things that occurred to me as you were speaking there just a second ago is, in so many therapy sessions where you're trying to work through conflicts, let's say husband-wife, and you're in therapy, you're going to be confronted by loops that you're in. And those loops keep coming and bringing you back to the same place. You said even if it's pain, even if it's suffering, that we can become literally in bondage to certain loops until we have the insight to see how the loops work, which in the Enneagram, what you're talking about today is to see how I work, to see what makes me tick, to see the things I'm susceptible to, as well as the things that are on the healthy side of what comes with my innate nine-ness.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's why, again, I love this journey, is because you can look at the levels, and we'll go through levels later, but each of us, whether you know the Enneagram or not, growth happens, evolution happens in our life. You can call it a phase, or you can, if you're talking about the Enneagram, well, we have levels that we talk about. And at your very, very unhealthiest level, you know, if you're stepping back and looking at yourself, or you can see it in others at times, they're at their most unhealthy. It almost becomes a desperate stage at that point. But then you can look at where you've come from and look back and say, I used to think this way. I used to function this way. I used to center my life around, as a 2, not me, but if you're a 2, taking care of others. I can't go out of town because someone might need me.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
we've heard that statement made.
We have heard that. And you, at some point, become conscious that, wait, I matter in my own life. And if I'm not putting the oxygen on my own, putting my own oxygen mask on first, then I can't take care of others. I love that example.
Yeah.
Put your own oxygen mask on first. They tell you that on the airplane. And especially as a mom, you think, well, no, I have to take care of my child first. But if you're dead, you're not going to be able to take care of your child. So, yes, that's a good example for this right here. Saying no to someone else occasionally does not mean you don't love them. And in fact, they'll begin to understand, oh, she loves herself. I like that. She took care of herself. I would like to be more like that.
Hey, and sometimes whether people like it or not, they need to know that. That's, I think, the hard thing for me as a peacemaker is that you're always working not to have conflict. And I could see that as a 2, right? Is that if you want to be a servant of someone so that you get the love back, or you want to be a peacemaker so you get the love back, the last thing you'd want to do is just say no because of the fear that you're not going to get the love back.
That's it. But
exactly. That's
Exactly.
what the other person needs to hear, right?
Right. And it's like we talked about, I think last time, the you complete me.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I complete me. And that way, being a whole person, loving myself, gives me more strength to love others, to love my partner, to love my community. But it is not selfish. It's absolutely necessary to give yourself that grace.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, well, I'll sum it up like I do at the end of each of our podcasts. I asked a group of people, what do you love about your number? And a friend of mine, I love this girl. I met her in our Enneagram certification course. Her name is Lori. I could go on and on about her, but I'm not going to give her last name at this point. But she said, I love how 2s have this innate ability to welcome others and make them feel at ease in whatever environment they are in. The idea of being seen as a welcoming and safe person for others brings me a lot of joy. What a beautiful realization to say, yeah, this is what I love about my number.
That's a great one. That's a great one. Be great to have a lot more of those 2s out there in the world.
Oh, I've got a lot more, and
Love it.
I'll share it. But for this episode, thank you for tuning in. I hope you take some time to reflect on your own number, the beauty of who you are. Ask the questions. Am I loving myself so I can in turn love others? And today, I just want to say again, I hope you get to find out the joy of who you are by truly loving your own number. Thank you, and we will be back next week. Hey, it's time to go mow the yard.
All right, I'm gone.
Love you. Bye.